Broadcast has been set.
Thank you. And good evening, everyone. My name is Alvarez Ruiz, Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee and student member of the board. It brings me great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, and I look forward to our work tonight. We'll now start with introductions because I see we have quite a bit of people today. So we'll start with introduction by committee members, so board members, then administration staff, board office staff, and board legal counsel. So I'll start with my vice chair.
Good evening. This is Walter Fields, Vice Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee and Board Member at Large.
Good evening. I'm Judy Mickens-Murray, Chair of the Board and Board Member at Large.
Hi, Pamela Boozer Strother, District 3 Board of Education member and member of this committee.
Dr. Baldwin, if you could take it away.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Christy Murphy Baldwin, Chief of Human Resources for Prince George's County Public Schools. I will hand it over to Dr. Libby.
Good evening, Kyra Libby, Strategic Initiatives Officer and Blueprint Coordinator for Prince George's County. Dr. Jacks.
Good evening, Nina Jacks, Project Manager for Blueprint in the Strategic Initiatives Office. Selena.
Good evening, Selena Ward, Project Manager for Strategic Initiatives Office. Dr. Whitehead.
Good evening, Gladys Whitehead, Sub-Team Lead for Pillar 1 of the Blueprint. And Dr. Baldwin already went. Olivia.
Good evening, Olivia Pearson, College Readiness Supervisor and Pillar 3 Co-Lead. And I will send it over to Dr. Caney.
Good evening, I am Melissa Caney. I'm the ESOL Supervisor and I am the Pillar 4 Lead for the Blueprint. And I will pass it over to Trinell.
Good evening, everyone. Trinell Bowman, Associate Superintendent for Special Education. Robin, I'll pass it over to you.
Good evening. I'm Robin Welch, the Director of Government Relations, Compliance and Procedures, and I will pass it over to Darnell.
Good evening. This is Darnell Henderson, attorney for Prince George's County Public Schools. And I am not clear who I need to pass it to because I think everybody has introduced themselves. Is there someone, Mr. Whiteley?
No, actually, Mr. Henderson, I'm going to jump in and take the pleasure of introducing our acting Chief Financial Officer and let her say her name.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Baldwin. My name is Lisa Howell, and I am the acting Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Board office staff, followed by legal counsel.
Cindy Adley, Administrative Secretary to the Board Office and Administrative Support to the Policy and Governance Committee.
And we have Mr. Whitley.
Good evening, everyone. Dennis Whitley III with the law firm of Shipley and Horn, and we are General Counsel for the Board of Education.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm so excited to have you here today. Like I said, we're going to run a tight shift. I know we have a lot to discuss today, so we're going to move along. So 1.3, adoption of the meeting agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the February 14th, 2023 meeting agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved in second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes and our agenda is adopted. Approval of committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the January 31st, 2023 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved in second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes and minutes are approved. 2.0 public comment. There are no registered public comment speakers this evening. Registered public comment speakers can be live, pre-recorded using video or audio, or they can write their testimony and send it to us. So we'll start with our legislative update. So tonight we will receive legislative updates from two of our committee members, Ms. Welsh, and Vice Chair Fields. First, we'll hear from Mrs. Welsh, who will be accompanied by Mr. Darnell Henderson, who is our PCPS Special Education Attorney, and Ms. Trinell Bauman, Associate Superintendent for Special Education, who will speak on House Bill 0294, County Boards of Education, Due Process Proceedings for Children with Disabilities, Burden of Proof. Ms. Welsh.
Good evening. First, I'd just like to say that yesterday, February the 13th, MABE had their legislative committee meeting, and board member Boozer Strother and myself were in attendance at that meeting. And we do have posted the bill highlights and bills for decisions that are on the agenda. So if I encourage you all to look at it, it gives you an idea of what's happening with each of the bills and where they are and what they stand for. I'm not going to say anything more because we have such a busy night ahead. And we do have so many guests. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is House Bill 294, which is the one on due process proceedings for children with disabilities and burden of proof. And just to give you a very quick synopsis of that bill, that is a bill that is currently the burden of proof is placed on parents when they file for a due process hearing, in which they are basically alleging that the school system has not provided appropriate services or whatever it might be, but they haven't met IEP requirements. And the burden of proof does sit with parents right now. And this bill proposes to actually switch that burden of proof over to the public school systems in Maryland. And the only exception does say that if it's a parent going for a unilateral placement, then of course the burden of proof would not be in place. But other than that is it's just that change, which is a major change, because what it does imply is that the school system then maybe it's implied that the school system hasn't met its requirements, and they're going to have to actually prove that they have met the requirements. Just as a little aside, there has been a lot of testimony on this in support of the bill, both from parents, from the Attorney General's office, and from like PTAs and ARC, things like that. Maryland Association of Board of Educations is opposing that bill, as well as the Maryland State Teachers Association, Education Association, as Maryland State Education Association, and they are absolutely opposing the bill because they feel strongly that what it's saying is that our teachers are not competent and that they aren't doing the job they're supposed to do. It's assuming that by placing the burden over on the school system. At our last meeting, you had asked if there was any chance that anyone from the Special Advisory Committee and the Special Attorney could come and answer any questions that you may have related to this bill. And so they are here for the committee members, that any questions you may have, these are the experts and they can answer your questions. So I'm not going to speak any longer. I will just let committee members ask your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. Colleagues, any questions? Ms. Boozer Strother?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad we're taking time on this bill, because there is clearly, I think, at a national and state landscapes changes in thinking of what has been traditionally longstanding, where the burden of proof is on special education cases. And we did have an interesting conversation with the MABE Legislative Committee yesterday, and Howard County is coming out in support of this bill and reference New Jersey, and I think New York is influencing them on I guess the argument around the cost to the system. And I guess that means legal costs. I think from a board member perspective, representing all stakeholders and parents of special education students, this is one of the more painful categories of our work, and I think we probably all understand that from our different seats that we sit in. And certainly what I'm seeing on the landscape is that the promise of the blueprint for special education would be providing the resources to all of Maryland school systems to perform at the highest level in special education, because it's finally resourced equitably. And of course, time will tell on that, but I do think we need to stay open to this legislation for those reasons and for the Attorney General's view on this as well, which I was not aware of, the support from the Attorney General's office. So I'm glad we're talking about it, and I definitely I'm very interested from a statement from the CCAC parents, like the advocate members, if they're willing to write us a statement. But you know, if I'd love to hear from my colleagues, and if they have specific questions of the legislation and to our staff. But thank you all for being here and being open to this conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fields.
I just want to concur with my colleague, Board Member Boozer Strother. You know, this is an equity issue, and we should not lose sight of that. Parents are at a grave disadvantage in these situations. I have sat in on many parent school conversations with special education students, and you can see the disadvantage in the room. And I was in New Jersey, where parents are not so burdened. So I think that this is a bill that is timely. I think it aligns with the blueprint for Maryland's future. And I think we have to look at it as just another equity question that we need to answer in the right way to make sure our students are receiving the services that they are legally entitled to.
Thank you. Chair McInnes-Murray.
Quick question. The folks that are in the room, do you see this as an incentive for school systems to do better by our special needs students? Anybody? Is anyone here from the advisory group, special needs advisory group?
So no, Board Member Meekins-Murray, no one is here from our Citizens Advisory Committee, but I think the point is well taken in terms of getting what their opinion is. And so I'm happy to follow up with our CCAC board to get their position on this bill, and then I would share that with Ms. Welsh.
Yeah, but I was also interested in, does the administration believe, and I realize that it can be perceived as a negative, but do you see it as being, if we put it in a positive light, an incentive for teachers who are teaching our special needs children to do a more comprehensive job, I'll say?
So I would just say, in terms of thinking through our general supervision and monitoring, whether the bill is passed or not, I think we have always, in terms of our training and coaching and follow-up, that is always important to implement the IEP as written. And so everything that we do around our training and coaching and technical assistance is addressing the needs of our students and ensuring that that IEP is implemented. If we find that through our monitoring or through our review that an IEP is not being implemented, we conduct our own internal review, which could be looking at a group of students, you know, one student in a class, or it could be looking at a group of students in a school. So we take it very serious when we get a parent concern or complaint that an IEP is not being implemented. We not only look at that individual case, but depending on what the concern is, we may look globally across a grade level, across a program, or even across a school, and in some cases across the district. And then based on that, we may even look at updates to administrative procedures that may need to be followed, to update to really escalate an issue or concern to be able to address it through our administrative procedures or through training and coaching. So I would say that we take any concern about an IEP not being implemented very seriously, and work very closely with our general counsel's office as well as all their offices to ensure that we are doing those reviews of situations and cases. And then if not, when we find that it may not have been implemented, we are holding those IEP impact meetings to have those discussions. So very often we bring concerns to parents and they may not even be aware that actually there is a special ed vacancy or that there is an impact. And so we do that as part of our normal practice, if that answers your question.
Okay, and one final question. Do we see additional resources being required for the monitoring?
So yes, we have over the years allocated additional positions to address our monitoring. And so we continue to look at that across our staffing allocations, particularly at the district level. So over the years, we have increased the number of staff members who are involved in monitoring. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Board Member Boozer Strother.
Yeah, just following up on Chair Mickens Murray, I was sort of thinking along the same lines. My question was, what resources will it take for the division to not to be supportive of this change? Because I'm trying to reconcile with, I'm not asking if you're an expert on what happened in New Jersey, but something must have changed, to be able to have the conditions to support this change in burden of proof. So I'm wondering what your perspective is on that, what the division would need.
I'm wondering if I should yield this to just Attorney Henderson, just for his perspective in terms of him reviewing the bill, and if there is something from his perspective that he could share.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, Chair Bowser Struthers, if you could just repeat your question, I want to make sure that I'm answering it, that my answer is in line with the question.
Yeah, just, I think through the blueprint, we fully recognize that special education has been underfunded, and over the years, there will be more resources. I guess the question is it enough? Is the division fully staffed? Does it have the resources it needs? Because my expectation is burden of proof would not, this feels to me, this burden of proof legislation feels kind of legacy, in public schools. It's been around so long, we just accept it as fact, as the way it should be. So what would we need to flip that it's not a concern, that the burden of proof would be on the system?
Well, when we think about the burden of proof, it's really sort of codified in Schaefer v. Wiest, the Supreme Court case from 2005. And so when we, before the Supreme Court case, there was a myriad of different ways to approach the burden of proof in special education litigation matters. But, anytime the paradigm shifts, there's going to be ripple effects. And do we know what those are at this point? No. But, the right of the parents to file due process in regards to the identification, evaluation, educational placement, and FAPE concerns for their disabled student, when parents have if the burden does shift, I think that's going to be there may be an impact to the system that we may not be able to foresee at this point, because this is so new, and what we don't have from my understanding is any longitudinal studies done as relates to the effects that burden shifting has had on school districts.
Okay, thank you. I will certainly understand that history better about the Schaefer v. Wiest and the longitudinal studies and what we may need to be looking at for PGCPS. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Any further questions, colleagues? Hearing that.
Excuse me, can I just say, Board Member Briggs just joined us, and I know he was the one who actually said about having a special ed attorney here to ask questions. So I just want to make sure he has an opportunity to ask any questions that he might have.
Board Member Briggs, do you have any?
Oh, well, I really appreciate that, Ms. Walsh. Ms. Welsh. I do, and if it's possible, if we can come back to this kind of question and answer, I just want to make sure they're thoughtful and well thought out. And I want to have opportunity to review the agenda, which I haven't had because I was rushing from work, so I apologize.
I have a few questions, so hopefully by that time maybe. So I guess my question was, and I don't know who this would go through, was kind of walking me through the impact a bill like this would have on the school system, on teachers. What's the impact if this bill were to pass on PGCPS?
Mr. Henderson, do you want to take that, or do you want me to start with just kind of what happens when we get a due process filing? I can take it from the programmatic side, and then if you want to pick up on how we would interact with the Office of General Counsel. So when we get if a parent files a due process filing, the parent would then, file that with the Office of Administrative Hearings. When we get that in our office, we do have compliance specialists as well as a compliance liaison. Our compliance liaison is the person that manages our due process proceedings that come into the district. There's certain timelines that we have to follow in terms of sending up a tracking form to the Office of Administrative Hearings, noting if we are agreeing to hold a resolution meeting or we're agreeing to mediate, depending on what the parent checked on that particular form. Once we send that up within 3 days to the Office of Administrative Hearings, we do have to hold a resolution meeting within 15 days of receiving that due process. And so based on the filing, the parent will indicate how they feel we can resolve the matter. So if it's in a case of the parent might not have agreed with the IEP team's decision for placement, and they believe that their child should be placed at such said setting, that would be a piece that we would discuss with the parent during the resolution. And so as part of that, you do have a Office of Administrative Hearing judge that sits in on the resolution. And the goal is to resolve the matter and that to not go forward to a hearing. And so we do work, our compliance team does work closely with our school team in terms of fact finding. We have to go out and based on the allegations, we have to do the research if this is founded or not founded. And then we give a recommendation and working with our Office of Administrative Hearings. And then I'm going to let Mr. Henderson talk on the side of the Office of General Counsel, whether the parent is represented by an attorney or not, depends on the next step. So I'll let Mr. Henderson kind of talk about how we interact with his office.
So the goal is anytime an administrative due process complaint is filed on behalf of a student with a disability, the goal is always resolution if possible. The beautiful thing about the IDEA is that there are safeguards built into the law that requires parties to come to the table, have a conversation, and meaningfully think about creative ways to resolve the matter. Due process is always the last resort. It doesn't support building good relationships when you are in adversarial positions with parents. So when we think about this new law and the burden shifting, is it something that's necessary with the safeguards that are already built into the system? The General Assembly is going to have to wrestle with that question. But what we do in the Office of General Counsel is to think of creative ways to find solutions to the parents' concerns while also ensuring that the school district is protected from any liability.
Thank you, Mr. Board Member Briggs. That inspire anything.
Chair Serrano Reeves. I think that was a good amount of time for me to figure out what I wanted to ask, which was just, and you may have already answered this, so apologies if you have. But I was just curious what burden falls on parents in preparation for these hearings. What is the threshold for them, like as far as evidence and bringing forth all the information that they need? What is that specific requirement?
And Ms. Bowman, if you don't mind, I'll take that question. So the word burden is an interesting word because it has this connotation that there's a weight put on a parent. And it's like I said, the beautiful thing about the IDEA is that it's deliberately informal. And so, you can be a parent or an advocate and participate in due process. one of the things that the IDEA allows for example, is that if a parent disagrees with an assessment that was conducted by the school system, if the parent says, I disagree with this educational assessment, and the school system has to either fund the assessment or file for due process. And like I said, the goal here, in my experience with Prince George's County Public Schools, is to find creative solutions to avoid due process if possible. So that's sort of where we are, and the actual legal burden here that we're talking about, the standard is more likely than not. So when you think about a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt is that standard, but for the administrative due process cases for special education, the standard is more likely than not. Did this thing happen?
Thanks so much for that, Mr. Henderson. Another question I had was, and this is maybe a bit in the weeds, so feel free to say I don't know. But I know IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, has never been fully funded by the federal government. And for a number of reasons, that creates a significant burden on schools. A lot of times they aren't able to address the significant needs that exist for special education students. And thus, I was just reading a New York Times article that talked about students kind of disproportionately with special needs or disabilities being put out of class. And actually those, a lot of times those kind of soft pushing them out of class intervention or responses to behavioral issues are not tracked or not reported. So there's kind of this barrier that exists. So I'm just thinking, as far as it pertains, again, going back to the original question around the burden that parents have, and taking into context what you just said, that word is very loaded, but also taking into context that IDEA has never fully been funded. And a lot of times I'm sure parents don't know that, and you have to do a lot of tracking, and then there's information that's not being tracked by schools. What would you say as kind of a legal representation around, again, I think just going back to the challenges that families may face if they're representing themselves around getting the information and making sure that they're presenting clear cases? Are there any supports that PGCPS offers, or how do you, as a lawyer who's essentially trying to avoid due process, how do you navigate that? And please tell me if my question is not clear.
Your question is clear. And actually, I will defer to Trinell as relates to the unrepresented parents, because I deal less with them. And I will say this so that we're all sort of clear about the Office of General Counsel's role. When parents are not represented, what the IDEA says is that attorneys cannot. So if a parent comes to a due process and files a complaint, if the parent is not represented, the IDEA says that the attorney for the school district cannot participate in the resolution conversations. Because as we know, sometimes bringing in an attorney to a meeting or to a conference sort of escalates things in a way that doesn't always lead to resolution of the issue. So one of the safeguards that's built into the IDEA is that when parents are pro se, attorneys are not allowed to participate in the resolution process. But I will throw this to Ms. Bowman as relates to some of the intricacies to that process.
So one of the things that we do have in Prince George's County in our Department of Special Education is a family support center. And so our family support center, we have a social worker and 3 other full-time staff members. One of those staff members is a bilingual parent liaison. And so our goal through that group and through that office is really to work hand in hand with parents. If there are concerns that parents are bringing to our attention, we even have family support members who can go to IEP meetings with them, help them unpack what does the IEP mean, and really act as a liaison between the school team and the parent to help resolve matters. So we've been very successful with adding additional staff to our family support center to really help parents navigate disagreements and really help them come up with plausible resolution and solutions. The other big piece in terms of resources, and when we think about our administrative procedure, at any time a parent can request a copy of any educational record. So we do have an administrative procedure that governs that. But at any time, if a parent wants to see service logs, if they would like a copy of an assessment report, prior written notices, IEPs, the parent can make that request. They can also come and inspect their child's record at any time. We also encourage parents to, if there's a concern, there is kind of an escalation document that we have done in terms of how parents can resolve matters. So even every year through the Department of Special Education, we do release a resolution document that tells parents what they can do to resolve anything from transportation concerns, health services, not in agreement with placement. So we send that out every year to all of our parent groups so that we can make sure that they have the right information and who to contact to help resolve matters. The other thing that I would say that we have as a resource for our parents, even on our website, is questions that they may have and who they may need to go to also resolve that. So we send information out through our distribution contact list. We have information on our website. And then the last thing that I would share is we do have a Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee that we work very closely with. So if concerns are emerging in the field or in the community, they do alert me of those, and I do follow up directly individually with those parents. And then we also have monthly CCAT parent meetings where parents have an opportunity to discuss any concerns they may have systemically or on a case-by-case basis. And then my team and I are there to help navigate those concerns and follow up accordingly. So those are just some of the resources that we have available to parents who may have concerns around disagreement with school teams or how they can resolve matters.
Great. My last question, and thank you so much for that, Ms. Bowman, was just around the kind of legal maneuvering that parents would need to do or that they would have to do if they were to move forward with a claim or an issue that they were having. When they go through those initial IEP meetings, where their child has been identified, they're having a discussion with the person that'll be supporting them through their process. Is that information accessible for them? Like whether it is sent out, electronically or sent out in a newsletter or other, other ways that it's sent out? Is it shared with them during those meetings what their opportunities are if they were to, face a challenge?
Yeah, so legally we have what we call a prior written notice. So for every meeting that we have is a record of the meeting minutes, so to speak. We call it a prior written notice in Maryland. So within that, it talks about the procedure safeguard document, the family support center. So within that template, we do have resources that are readily available to parents if they should seek additional information. And that goes out after every IEP meeting that we hold.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And also, if I could just piggyback off of that, Mr. Briggs, the parents also receive annually or more often if they request it, the MSCE procedural safeguard manual, which sort of breaks down their rights as a parent of a student with a disability in the state of Maryland.
And the last thing I'll add, Mr. Briggs, is on our landing page for the Department of Special Education, there is a landing page that talks about how to resolve disagreements. So that's something else that we have put on our website. And we also have a special education parents page that also includes a link to the procedure safeguards as well.
Great. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Ms. Welsh, do we know if this bill has a hearing date?
I was just checking. Hold on 1 second. The hearing date actually has come and gone. It's February the 8th that they had a hearing date.
Okay. And do you know when it may come back?
No, I can certainly check into that.
All right.
Find that out for you.
I only ask in terms of time for board members to decide if the board should take a position on this. So I'll say I'm gonna let all the information settle in with everyone, sit in, let it reminisce, and then we'll discuss if we should take a position on this bill. But with that, thank you so much, Ms. Bowman and Mr. Henderson. Colleagues, thank you for the questions. If you wish to say feel free. If not, you can go ahead and enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day. But thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. So now we'll hear an update on House Bill 1079, Prince George's County Board of Education and School System Revisions and Local Public Campaign Financing for Board of Education members. Mrs. Welsh. You're muted, Ms. Welsh.
Thank you. 1079 is broad. It covers a lot of different areas. So I'm just going to quickly just hit all the different areas that bill does cover. It mandates, goes back to the board having 9 elected members and 4 appointed members. And then it changes the term of the chair and the vice chair from 2 years to 1 year. And if you recall, this past year, the law changed it from 1 year to 2 years. So now they're moving it back to 1 year. And then there's language in the law about the responsibilities of the board chair. And then it also talks about the fact that the Board of Eds, Board of Eds in Maryland must, or in Prince George's County must have bylaws to govern their conduct and review, and they must review and update those bylaws every 4 years. As far as professional development, they have extensive language in that bill related to the topics of professional development that the elected board members must take, which is interesting. It doesn't say all board members, it just says the elected board members. And then on or before December 1 of each year, each elected board member shall submit professional development disclosure statements. And then on or before January 30th, the board then will post the professional developments, disclosure statements on their website. And then it also mandates that the board will convene a retreat, and each elected board member shall attend the complete professional development that's happening in the retreat. They have to set annual performance goals and complete a board evaluation. And then the results of the board's self-evaluation shall be posted on its website. It also talks about the PCAC, our Parent Community Advisory Committee, and says that the composition of that PCAC must reflect the geographic, racial, ethnic, cultural, and gender diversity of the county. And then it also says that the Prince George's County Public Schools, they have to establish an audit committee to ensure that public funds for the school system are spent equally across all the Prince George's County Public Schools. And then it changes the title of the CEO back to the county superintendent, which, if you recall, probably, I want to say back in 2013, it had changed, the law had changed the title superintendent to CEO. So now this bill is changed, switching it back to superintendent. It then talks about performance goals for the board and the CEO. And that together they have to establish goals, and then they have to evaluate the performance of the goals. And then they have to survey stakeholders and the community to measure public opinion and confidence in the board, the superintendent, and Prince George's County Public Schools. And then utilize those survey results to develop their goals. And at the first board meeting of every year, the Board of Education must review their roles, their duties and responsibilities of the board and the superintendent, announce the annual performance goals, discuss the results of the self-evaluation, and discuss the professional development completed by the board members. Then in this bill, it also talks about an Office of Accountability and Compliance. So they are saying that the bill would mandate the establishment of an Office of Accountability and Compliance that would be an independent unit of county government, and that there would be an Inspector General who would head up this Office of Accountability and Compliance. And the whole purpose of the Office of Accountability and Compliance would be to provide accountability and transparency in the expenditures of public funds for education in Prince George's County, and to ensure that the Prince George's County Public School personnel are in compliance with ethical standards. And then it says the Inspector General shall investigate instances of fraud, waste, and abuse involving the use of public funds and property and compliance with applicable state and local ethics laws. And also the Inspector General shall conduct compliance, financial, information technology, internal investigations, operational audits. Then it says just in terms of how the Inspector General will operate, they are able to obtain sworn testimony. They have subpoena powers. They can refer the matters to the appropriate federal, state, and local law enforcement authorities if they think there's been any criminal violations. And then the Office of Accountability and Compliance shall submit a report on or before December 1st each year to the board, the superintendent, the governor, and the General Assembly, which consists of the Office of Accountability and Compliance goals and priorities for the upcoming year, the number of incidents investigated, and a summary of the nature of those incidents. And then a little bit more. There's specific findings and recommendations related to the incidents of fraud, waste, and abuse, and compliance with state and local ethics laws. There is a small little section that talks about the voting rights of the student board member. It does expand those voting rights for the student board member, as well as it allows the student board member to attend closed sessions unless the board is addressing an appeal on a personnel matter, in which then the student board member may not vote. Now this, I didn't quite understand what they were saying. It's for a term of board members. It says an elected member is eligible for reflection. I don't know what that means, but reflection, and may not serve on the board for more than 2 terms. And then there is something also about campaign financing, that after the governing board of the county has implemented a system of public campaign financing for at least 1 election cycle, the governing body may establish by law a system of public campaign financing for elected members of the board. So that is sort of it in a nutshell. It's a expansive bill, and it's covering a wide variety of topics.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. And I do want to share, colleagues, that the bill does have its late bill hearing before the delegation on Sunday at 4 p.m. So that's when it should be heard by the delegation. Chair Mickens-Murray, you're on mute.
Thank you. Quick question. But everything that's in this bill, is this bill's intent to be substantive enough to support this new office of the Inspector General? Anybody know? Because that's what it seems to me. It seems that they have put a lot in here. I don't even know who would monitor all of this. Some of it makes sense, some of it to me does not. But that's my question. So I think we need to look more into. And the other question is, and I don't know if you know this, Robin, but this Inspector General, is this person supposed to oversee other folks other than the school system board? That's
I got the impression it was for the school system and the Board of Education. And I will say that much of what it does is very duplicative from the standpoint of we already have a Maryland Inspector General doing the very same thing, as well as you all, the Board of Education has your internal audit office that does extensive audits on all the topics that they talked about, and even more so in the school system.
Yeah, I was being facetious, but I understand all of that. But when I read this bill, it looks like it's trying to establish some duties and some work for a entity, and that entity to me right now might be the Inspector General's new role. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Boozer Strother.
Thank you. I mean, I guess we're just gonna correct me where we are in this, but there's just so much of this to respond to, but in the interest of that we are being, collaborative and working with the delegation on this, that there are things in here to support, but I definitely raise that, I would immediately at the outset strike, support with revisions that we strike that office of the Inspector General, and that we strike subtitle 4B, the county board shall establish an audit committee to ensure that public funds for the county school system are spent equally across all the schools in the county system. the blueprint legislation is about equitable funding. This is like in direct contrast to what we've been working on, and also as our strategic plan. I don't know if that was the intent, but equal funding in this system is totally unacceptable. I mean, you cannot have overcrowded schools equally funded with under enrolled schools. I mean, I'm just not sure if they understood what they were putting here, but that would have to drop. And, you know, I'd like to hear from my colleagues other elements that they have issues with, but certainly, you know, I think our even asking fully elected board, I mean, there are things in here that certainly the county's been asking for, so we need to acknowledge that, but there's certain things that are extremely problematic. So I'll listen to my colleagues' thoughts on this.
Vice Chair Fields.
Much of what is in this is also in HB 437, which I was going to present on tonight. So let me just start with this Office of Integrity and Compliance, because it calls for the creation of an integrity and compliance officer. Ms. Welsh is absolutely correct. It really duplicates functions that are already carried out by our Office of Internal Audit, as well as the fact that Maryland does have an Office of the Inspector General for Education. This new office would not only be duplicative, it would carry great taxpayer expense. And it seems as though it is a proposal to try to find a problem that doesn't exist. Many of the issues that they raised in this bill, if you look at our internal audit office, are already covered, including issues of transparency, reporting, the fact that the Office of Internal Audit reports to the board and has proper oversight of executive management functions. This is a very problematic proposal because it also inserts the county. This is an office that would exist in the county that would oversee the Board of Education in the Prince George's County Public School System, which I think takes away the power of even voters who are now electing members to the Board of Education. So that's number one. Number two, my colleague, Board Member Boozer-Strother is absolutely right. There is everything but the kitchen sink in this legislation. And I think we really have to pick it apart. Issues of limiting board members to 2 terms, that also takes the power out of voters who should be able to express whether or not they want term limited members of the Board of Education. The fact that you have language that talks about equal funding, which is not only against the principle of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, it's against state law. And so, you know, this bill is very problematic, and I'm troubled by it because I think it suggests that there is not an effort on the part of our county government to have a constructive dialogue with this public school district. This sort of came out of the blue. I don't believe that we had any prior discussions, board leadership with the county council on this matter. And so I think as a board, we have to be very concerned if this is how we are going to operate as county leadership. We have to be better than this. This bill misses all the significant points. And yes, I like the idea of expanded voting rights for our student board member. I think that's a good thing. But oftentimes what will happen in legislation is they will put a few good things in a very bad bill. And I think this is a very bad bill. And I think we need to communicate our concerns to the delegation and to the county council that going forward, you know, we invite conversation with them about the direction of our public school system, but this is not the way. This is very troubling. And I think that it also shows a lack of attention, because just in the matter of the creation of an Office of Integrity and Compliance, all you have to do is visit the school district website and see what the Office of Internal Audit does and how they report and the transparency that's there. And there would have not been any need for the creation of another office. And we budget that office for over $2 million. I mean, it is a staffed office that is doing the work to make sure that we have a high degree of integrity in our public school system. So that would be my reaction, Chairman. And I hope that we can take apart this bill and send our concerns to the bill sponsor as well as the county council, because this originated in the county council. And I think we have to remember that. And so those members of the county council who thought that it was necessary to introduce this bill should be willing to have a conversation with us to ask the questions, because if they had done that beforehand, much of this would have not been necessary.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fields. Before I call on Board Member Briggs, I just want to say welcome to Board Member Dr. Miller. Just wanted to say hello. I see you popped in. But Board Member Briggs.
Thanks so much, Chair Serrano Ruiz. So I just want to say that I think there are some bright spots in the legislation, around the, sharing of information for campaign finance and other pieces. So I think those are things, if they aren't already in existence, which I apologize for my ignorance in not knowing that, but if they aren't already in existence, then I think those are good pieces. Some of the concerns I have, and I think I'll echo my colleagues, is that this bill doesn't seem to take into account a number of things that I think are, very important to just how schools function and how we determine goals. I know it gives the power to the county, to the school board, and to the superintendent to determine goals. I'd love to know if those goals aren't, I'm assuming they should be in alignment with Maryland's kind of overall agenda of where they want to go. And if there's any kind of sub-language, I didn't see a reference to a subsection, referencing another piece of legislation around what those goals might be, or is that up for the school? Well, it sounds like it's up for the school board and for the superintendent to determine that. So I would be concerned about that, because I really will want to make sure that we have a strong understanding, since, not everyone is an education expert. And our superintendent will have that background, but also there are different philosophies of what's right. And so it should be aligned with the goals that Maryland has as well. So that's something that I wanted to mention. Also, something that was a little bit alarming to me, but I don't know how I feel about it, I'm still processing it, is if this is on page 14, and it says, if the Inspector General is professionally qualified in the area of education policy, the Inspector General also shall be professionally qualified through experience or education in at least one of the other areas listed in the paragraph of this subsection. I guess I would have concerns about the Inspector General offering their education expertise on the matter if they're kind of being, an outside force that's assessing and also taking stock on what it is that we aren't doing. So I guess I just would have concerns with them being also a party kind of guiding us around what we should or shouldn't do. And would like to know that there's, there's some directive around a specific goal that's already been set that's in alignment with what Maryland has. That could be the blueprint plan, or if it's a directive in the legislation around how exactly those goals are set. So those are just things that I would say would be kind of pushes for this, in addition to a number of other things that I think folks have already mentioned.
Thank you, Chair Murray.
I'm not going to beat around the bush. I believe that this is a power grab. I think that someone in the county council or the county council wants to control the school system because of the finances that are being put into the system from the blueprint. So I'm not naive enough to think that all we need to do is pick apart pieces within this document. We need to look bigger than that. Whoever wrote this really wants to control the school system. And we cannot lose sight of that. And I think that we should fight it. I think we should stand up. I think that we should challenge the county council and ask one question. Why, after all of these years, do they honestly believe that they are in the best place to oversee the results for 131,000 children in this educational system? If they were looking at other systems within Prince George's County, I would say, maybe, yeah. No, they want to distract us. They want us to go through this document, pick it apart. And in the end, the goal is, if they move the Internal Audits Office under this new Inspector General, they will have already captured the piece that they're really after. So I'm for us taking a formal position against this document. Chair Saran Ruiz. I don't know how soon we need to do that. I don't know if we need to assign board members to different parts of this bill to pick it apart or get some administration folks standing beside us or sitting beside us. But we can't let this stand, and we cannot allow a lot of time to pass. Because if we allow the time to pass, then that gives the county council or whoever is behind this movement opportunities to do even more mischief. And I see this as mischievous. It's mischievous. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McMurray. Having heard everyone's comments, I asked Ms. Welsh if we were to send a letter with a position on behalf of the board, could it be a letter in opposition, but outlining some of the supports within the document? Because I wouldn't want to send a letter in opposition and then that opposition also be taken, we were all opposed to the voting rights piece as well for the student board member, so kind of would we be able to send a letter outlining the main concerns in opposition and then saying, hey, we're also supporting this?
But certainly you could put anything you would like into your letter to express your thoughts about the bill. From a strategic standpoint, I quite honestly, I don't have the knowledge base to give you any kind of guidance as far as what's the best approach to take it. But you absolutely can certainly write about what you oppose and what you support in the bill. It would be your decision, the committee's decision, how you would want to handle it.
Can I say something?
Yep, Dr. Miller.
Is my mic on?
Yes, it is.
I apologize for coming late, but it appears that you all are talking about something that Dr. Golson and Board Chair Mickens Murray have already sent a letter addressing a particular issue. And I think that at this point, that the chair and the CEO and the chair of the council need to start communicating. I mean, we can keep sending letters back and forth, but at some point we have to show some kind of collaboration with and the county council has to do just the same, some kind of collaboration with the county council. We cannot continue to accept the media conducting business for us. And when I say media, those going to the media, presenting information, or should I say a lot of misinformation as indicated in the letter co-signed by Dr. Golson and Board Chair Mickens Murray. And I'm just glad to see that the chair is Chair Mickens Murray, as well as others are ready to challenge the council. I'd just like to, rather than just jump in and a challenge, let's try to offer the olive branch to see how we can communicate and collaborate and understand that this is not we're not going to stand by for a takeover, because that's what it appears, as others have said, that certain council members are attempting to do. And a former board member who is now serving on the council had input of this information back in 2018. This issue came up about the CIP and its budget. So I just think at this point in time, we need to look at doing some verbal collaboration with the council and then move forward with the next steps. Thank you for allowing me to give my input.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fields.
I think it's really important that we state our position on this bill, and that we state it clearly, that we articulate those sections of the bill that are problematic, that we can support those provisions that we believe would be helpful. And then I agree with Dr. Miller in that statement. We can express the desire to have the leadership of both the board and the council to sit down to begin a constructive dialogue about how we move forward together. But I think we have to make this statement because I would hate for the public to believe that we did not have an opinion on this bill. For those members who were elected, I am an appointed member, but for those members who are elected, there's a responsibility to that constituency because you were elected to govern this public school district. And presumably what this bill would do would take away a lot of that authority. And I think the electorate should understand that because there was a decision made in this county to have an elected school board. And so I agree with all of my colleagues. And I think we should move quickly because there is a hearing on the 19th. And I think we should move quickly to have something drafted this week to be prepared to go to the Prince George's delegation and particularly the sponsors of the bill.
Thank you, Chair Murray.
Thank you, Chair Saran Urias. The board leadership is planning to have a conversation with the council's leadership. So I don't want anybody to think that we are not going down that path to build relationships. But at the same time, I agree with Mr. Fields. This is urgent. We need to respond to this bill. And whatever you need me to do, let me know. Whatever time you need me to dedicate to this effort, I'm willing to do it. I think it's that important. And I think it's important for us to stand up as an organization now, because this school system is doing good stuff. And I don't understand why that is not being recognized and respected. And for me, it's not being respected. So yes, we need to respond to this bill. And if we need to make a motion, I'm ready.
I'm ready to make a motion.
If you can make the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I move that the Policy and Governance Committee give the authority to the chair and vice chair of the board to send a letter of response to the Prince George's County delegation on Bill PG 50223.
I second.
Having moved in second, colleagues. I know I see your hand, Board Member Briggs, so anything you want to say?
Wasn't about the motion, so I was hoping I could before the motion.
Oh, I'll take it back then and you can speak and then I'll second it.
I would say go ahead. And we'll just jump back.
Yeah, Ms. Walsh, I was just hoping we could take a step back. You could just explain the kind of the impetus of the bill, where like how did this came about, and the why the authority, because I'm just curious. It's interesting to me that I think that the county can propose a bill that largely has to do with the school board and the superintendent without input. So if you could just explain maybe a little bit of where this came from and also how this bill came about, for whatever you may know, that would be helpful.
So unfortunately, except for knowing that the bill, I found out about the bill, I think on Friday, and immediately shared it with the chair of the board as well as the chair and co-chair of the committee. And I don't know how it actually came about. I have a feeling, though, I think the chair Murray said this, I think it truly is an effort to pull the authority and power away from the Board of Education and put it in the hands of the county. And that's what it appears to me. But as far as how that it all came about, that they decided to do that, I have no information about that.
Alrighty, seeing that is, if it's brief or Mr. Struther.
Well, I have some history on the bill itself. Comes from the report from the work group that Delegate Pena Melnick ran in November and December from the legislation. So the vast majority of what you see in here is repeated from the report. And we never took because this has moved so fast, we didn't even take the report, which I didn't receive until January, and I had to go searching for it. It wasn't given to us. Let's be very clear. It was not sent to us saying, hey, you should know this report is out. So we're now 4 weeks since that report is out. We could have responded to that statement about equal funding of each school building, saying, are you sure that's what you mean? We didn't even have that chance. The piece of this whole inspector thing, that came up in the last minute through this work group. It was not part of the original work group. Was Angela Alsobrooks work group sent recommendations to the delegation. Delegation took those recommendations to their own work group. And some of the stuff that's in their elected board, chair being elected, a lot of that stuff was from that. But the rest of it, 3 weeks ago, report came out, it wasn't even sent to us.
Thank you. Board Member Briggs.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Board Member Boozer Strother. So I think that was just the thing that I was trying to understand was, one, how we got here. Two, I feel like if we're writing a letter and we're going to write a letter of concern, it's important to be clear about what it is that our concerns are. You know, I think one, the fact that we weren't consulted about something that impacts the board, it seems to be problematic. I think the other piece is it legal? And I find it to be really strange that it's like, how can you propose legislation that doesn't incorporate the stakeholders, not even stakeholders, the actual like party that is being impacted. And so I feel like if we're drafting a letter and if we're bringing up concerns and if we want to halt the bill, then I think that's probably the way to go about it, right? Is to figure out, you know, have they actually followed the process that is in place? And if there's any way that we can get the
Can you
information.
hear me?
Yeah, what's that?
I'm on the policy and governance.
Doctor, yeah. And if there's any way to identify what that is, then I think that gives us less of the having to come up with all these issues that we have with the bill, and more, I don't necessarily want to say this publicly because it's obviously recorded, but I just think that it's important that we have a very clear argument as to why, so that we can strategically understand, not strategically, but I think be intentional about how we're going to address this issue. And I think the other piece is I just don't know much about the report that you were referencing, Boozer Strother. So maybe as a next step, if that could be shared with the board, so we could all like, if there is any historical information, I just feel like if we're moving fast, then this letter could be very intentional and clear. And it just doesn't seem like it's probably following the steps that are supposed to exist. And maybe Ms. Welsh, if there's anyone that could support us in getting that information, like even if it's a general counsel or something like that, then maybe that could be how we could move forward, perhaps.
We have a lawyer. The board has a lawyer. He's on the phone. He's here. Mr. Dennis Whitley. Ms. Whitley. You there?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm here.
Did you hear Mr. Briggs' concern?
I heard Mr. Briggs' concerns. We can look into it, but I believe that the legislation probably went through the proper channels, but we can definitely verify that. And I would think that would be a less strong position to attack the bill, but we can definitely verify that all the proper channels were followed when the General Assembly put the legislation in.
Yeah, okay, no, that's helpful. So, because I'm just trying to understand. So, the General Assembly proposed this legislation, or the executive, the county executive, and the county council. Can we clarify like where this came from? Yeah, thanks.
So I will say, so a work group was put together. A bill was passed last year in terms of changing the structure of the board. The same bill requested a work group will be convened with different citizens, organizations, parents, different things, county council members as well. And they would make recommendations into the implementation of that bill in terms of the structure of the board. And so once they develop their final recommendations with Delegate Nick Charles, they worked on drafting this bill. And so Delegate Nick Charles is the one who, well, I'll say put the bill through. And so if that answers your question.
Oh, I guess it's still on me. It doesn't necessarily, because I was trying to understand who created the task force. Was the task force suggested by the General Assembly? Who were the members of the task force? Was a school board member on the task force? That I'm trying to understand what representation we had, if anyone can answer those questions that I think are the important questions moving forward.
So I will ask that we, if Cindy, if you could share the bill that was passed last year, because I know it states who is supposed to be in the work group. And then also kind of who sponsored that original bill for last session. So I guess I could answer your question. But I will ask that we move along because it is 6:10. And we do have a good report to hear tonight. And so I will ask that we move on with the existing motion. So we did discussion. All those in favor? I mean, any opposition to the motion to give the board chair and vice chair the authority to develop a response with this bill on behalf of the board. Any objections? Ms. Welsh?
Can I just ask one clarifying question? The motion, is it only referencing House Bill 1079, or is it referencing both bills, House Bill 1079 and House Bill 043, which is the one that relates to the Integrity and Compliance Office, which has similarities, but is slightly different though.
As the maker of the motion, I would agree that it should be all bills related, and I apologize, I missed that. I thought it was all consolidated into one bill now, which is the version that I have is PG 50223.
Yeah.
But yes, all associated bills.
And I second that, yes.
Thank you. Any objections to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, motion passes. And Board Chair Mickens-Murray, I just asked that, and Vice Chair Lolita Walker, I see you enter the meeting, but I do just ask that you do keep the committee members up to date in terms of what's going into the letter itself before it is sent out. And I do ask, hopefully it's sent out prior to Sunday before the hearing, so the delegate definitely gets it.
Okay, I have one to ask, if it's okay, if the vice chair can work with Lolita and myself, Mr. Fields, and we need to know your availability as soon. I will check with, you said that Lolita had logged in?
Yes.
Okay, we'll check the availability tomorrow because we need to get something to them before Sunday.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I see a hand by Dr. Miller.
I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Briggs to suggest that he get staff or someone, he can do it. The information, the history of bills, you can go to the legislative services down in Annapolis. You can contact, I'm sure you can contact them to find out, because bills are submitted by county council members, the county executive, and then they're transferred to subcommittees in the House or in the Senate. And from there, there's a process that's followed. So if you need to know the history of it, I would suggest that you do some research with legislative services.
Thank you. Ms. Welsh, I see you have your hand.
Thank you, Chair Alvaro.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. You put your hand down. All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. We'll now move on to item 3.2, which is an update on the blueprint implementation. So tonight, Ms. Boozer-Strother will present alongside the PGCPS blueprint implementation team on the blueprint for Maryland's future implementation plan. So I'll now hand it to Ms. Boozer-Strother.
All right, thank you, Chair. So I'm very excited for our presentation this evening, and I'm going to quickly turn it over to Dr. Libby, who is the Blueprint Implementation Coordinator for PGCPS and her team. I sit on MABE's ad hoc committee for the Blueprint implementation, and this agenda item serves as our keeping in sort of compliance to the public to always have a standing agenda item. But tonight it's all about Dr. Libby's team. So Dr. Libby, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Jax is going to share her screen so we can see the PowerPoint. Excellent. And Dr. Jax, we can go to slide 4 because we already introduced ourselves. This evening, we're going to give you some background information and context on our blueprint and our implementation plan. Then we will go into the pillar work from each of the sub-leads, and we will end with Ms. Howe talking about blueprint and funding. So first, Dr. Jacks.
I was trying to unmute. Good evening. As Dr. Libby stated, we have done introductions already, and we will start with the background and purpose of the Blueprint Implementation Plan. So this plan is a response to low student achievement across the state of Maryland over a span of several decades. You can see the graph here spans at least 2 decades. And again, the response is the blueprint for implementation. The hope is that LEAs will come together and create a plan that will support students no matter where they live, no matter what conditions they are experiencing, and funds will be equitable. I'm going to move on to the next slide.
So the AIB, which is the Accountability and Implementation Board, work hand in hand with the Maryland State Department of Education. They are in all of our state meetings almost every week, and they work together on the template for the draft plan and for the comprehensive plan. And we'll give you some more information on the template and the comprehensive plan in the following slides. But I just want everyone to know that the AIB, and you're going to hear that a lot, AIB. So what is that? The AIB is like the overseeing agency that the state government created to help to make sure that the local educational agencies will do what they need to do in terms of blueprint. And then MSDE is working hand in hand with the AIB. The next slide. So this is just our timeline within Prince George's County. The implementation template was released in early December. We quickly got together with our sub-leads that you will hear from this evening. And we really started working on our draft plan in January. The teams are finalizing the responses this month. We hope to have the draft plan to Dr. Golson by March 7th, because we must submit our plan by March 15th. We also have on our website a survey for public feedback, and you will see that on another slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ward so she can give you some more background information on the plan and the AIB and MSDE.
Thank you. So as Dr. Libby said, we are currently in our drafting of our Prince George's County implementation plan. The big goal is that it aligns with the state level blueprint comprehensive plan that came out in December of last year. We do have some charges when it comes to creating our implementation plan. It needs to really address all the action items that we're going to take to address the 5 pillars. And it really needs to be concise. They've actually given us a page limit. They really want us to get to not so much a narrative, but actually the action items we're going to take. We are covering all 5 pillars. There is really an ask when considering this law and the funding that we consider how could we do things differently? How could we answer all the pillars with the actions that we already currently take, and do we need to take any new actions? Our strategies are sequential. This addresses the first 2 years of the blueprint. And really, they want to see what is our cross collaboration? What are all our partnerships that we work with external stakeholders and all the internal collaboration between departments to bring success to this implementation plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this overview because you're just going to hear it directly from our sub leads and all the work that they've detailed out. But the 5 pillars that are in the blueprint are early childhood education, ensuring that students are ready for kindergarten, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders that reflect the student population, making sure that students are on a pathway to be college and career ready from when they do graduate from high school, having more resources available for student success with the concentration on English language learners, special needs learners, and a new definition of concentration of poverty. And the last pillar, governance and accountability, really making sure that not only does the AIB review our implementation plans and make sure that we fulfill them with fidelity, but also how do we do that at a local level?
As you can see for Pillar 1, this pillar is focused on early childhood education. Our outcomes cover expanding publicly funded full-day pre-K, making sure those students are then ready for kindergarten, and expanding services to support our families. The strategies that we are going to implement to make sure that this happens, we're going to work with all of our internal departments to make sure that our Tier 1 students are addressed and increase enrollment. Tier 1 students are those students that are 0 to 300% above the federal income poverty level. Tier 2 students are those that fall within 301% to 600% of the poverty level, and anything 601% or higher are Tier 3 students. We propose to work collaboratively with our MSD identified childcare providers to cross-collaborate on enrollment, professional development, and providing service to all of our families, whether they're with us or if they're with the childcare providers. We're going to work with all of our partners to share data as well as resources, and we're going to expand our duty centers in the coming years. Our internal stakeholders, we will partner with every facet of the system, from human resources to assisting us with providing teachers and teacher assistants, to operations that will assist us with defining space so that we can expand the seats that we have to offer, as well as academics and school leadership and support in assisting us to prepare students to be kindergarten ready. And we will also seek out the support of our unions, Local 2250, that governs our teacher assistants, and of course, our Prince George's County Educators Association. For our external partners, we are reaching out to the Prince George's County Services. As you can see, also the Prince George's County Resource Center, which is the organization that represents our child care providers. We are looking at partnering with our Early Childhood Advisory Council, which has many members of the community at large as a part of that council. We also have our pre-kindergarten expansion grant partners. Right now, we have 4 partners in this category: the Family Child Care Alliance of Maryland, the Firm Foundation of Temple Hills, and Reed Temple Christian Academy, as well as Themba Creative Learning Center. And we need your help, as always, We would like an advocacy for encouraging our community providers to apply for MSDE's pre-kindergarten expansion grant. Once they apply for this grant, they become highly qualified providers, and they can assist with serving our families of 3- and 4-year-old students. It is not expected that the school system will house all of these students ourselves, but we are to link arms with our child care providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehead. Again, Christy Baldwin, Chief of Human Resources and co-lead for Pillar 2. I get the awesome pleasure of leading this group to look at high quality and diverse teacher leaders. And you see the outcomes that have already been provided on the screen. So if we could go to the next slide. So a couple of things that are really sticking out to this particular pillar that I just wanted to give the board an update on is that Prince George's County Public Schools is pretty much ahead of the game compared to all of our other LEAs. One, we've already finished our teacher negotiation. So therefore, we are already set to meet the requirements of a base minimum salary for incoming teachers at $60,000, which the commission or this particular pillar is saying that we need to reach it by 60,000. We've already worked with budget and our union partners to reach that goal. In addition to that, we've already started the first part of the teacher career ladder in regards to Pillar 2, and that is for our nationally board certified teachers. For those who may not know, we're actually second in the state of Maryland with the highest number of nationally board certified teachers, and we're number 5. We're in the top 5 of the country to have the largest number of nationally board certified teachers of color. So for us, we've already negotiated the compensation, which exceeds what the commission or the blueprint is asking for. So for our nationally board certified teachers, they are awarded a compensation of about $13,000. And for the 23 identified low performing schools by the state of Maryland for Prince George's County, those teachers would get $22,000 if they were to teach at that school. We are also working we actually started our work on the teacher career ladder 2 years ago in a partnership with the University of Maryland and Montgomery County. And so our career ladder is almost finalized, but the career ladder is not going to be implemented until July 1 of 2024, which is the actual requirement. Next slide. So our stakeholders, the initial stakeholders from the very beginning was definitely our union partners and our teachers in getting the career ladder. As I've shared with you, we finished our negotiations successfully. And so therefore, we are now, as we finalize our pillar, bringing into other groups that will be a part of this work. So we've been working with our teachers, our principals, instructional leaders, and other different offices that are within human resources that each have a component with the blueprint. And so our external stakeholder, again, has been the University of Maryland. They've been the ones who partner with us through a PDS grant to establish our career ladder, and then again with our union partners. I definitely want to give thanks to our wonderful board members who attend our meeting. Even if they have to be on the phone, they make sure they are there to support us. So thank you, Vice Chair Walker and board members, Alvarosa Rose. One of the things that I did want to point out is for our advocacy, we continue to ask of the board for consistency when it comes to licensure requirements. So right now, the legislation doesn't necessarily match the licensure required from MSDE, so that is concerning to us. So for example, you can earn your national board certification, but that may not align with what MSDE says is your teaching certificate. As you all know, that we actually try to find a lot of innovative approaches to bring on our teachers. So we look for career switchers. However, that is also a challenge because the state still requires a lot from our conditional teachers to become certified. And so we continue to ask for innovative approaches so that we can really try to keep our teachers. We actually lose our teachers to certification requirements. And so that's one of the things that we really want the board to continue to advocate for us is looking at the certification requirements so that we can really figure out innovative approaches to keeping our teachers. We already know research that testing is not always the easiest, but for me as a school district with such a robust teacher evaluation, I think there should be some effort put into that. Dr. Whitehead can also share with you, they're getting ready to change the teacher assistant requirements again and make them even more strenuous. So Maryland, you all have heard me import 68% of our educators. Yeah, and we are not a producing educator state, but yet we have the most strenuous requirements to come in here. And a lot of times our teachers who are coming from DC or Virginia, it's very difficult to for them to gain reciprocity. We would ask that you continue to fund our conditional educator program. It's amazing. And I thank you all for the funding that you put into that so that our teachers do not have to pay to earn that certification requirement that is imposed upon them from the state. So I think that is it for Pillar 2, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Olivia Pearson for Pillar 3.
Good evening again. Pillar 3 really focuses on college and career readiness and understanding that college and career readiness, of course, having all students having equitable access to become college and career ready, which means it does not start in high school, of course. It starts at the pre-K level, ensuring our students are on track and we are implementing college and career readiness pathways with fidelity and providing robust career counseling and CTE programming. Next slide. So how are we going to do this? We really are looking to evaluate students using different data points with their college and career readiness. Right now, the state is taking a look at the measures that are used for college and career readiness to see if they are appropriate. And by the fall, we will have new measures for determining college and career readiness for our students. We're also implementing college and career readiness pathways with our students. We have a very robust advanced placement, IB, dual enrollment, and CTE programs, and we're looking at updating all of these, of course, with guidance from the state. They're taking a look at all of our CTE programs and seeing which ones are working. And I'm saying they're looking at ours, they're looking at all of the CTE programs in the state to see what needs to be tweaked to ensure our students are leaving us ready for their pathway, whether they go to college first and then to their career, if they go directly into their career or into the military. We collaborate with our partners, and so specifically with our CTE programs and also the career counseling, we are partnering with Employ Prince George's, our local workforce development board, as well as the community college, to glean best practices as what we have already done to develop a robust career advising program for all middle and high school students. And as the legislation unfolds, we are consistently reevaluating our planning and implementation. This is not legislation that is, you take a look at what you have now and tweak it and think that we can just run with that. We have to constantly reevaluate and see how we are addressing the needs of all of our students. Next slide. Who are our stakeholders? So internally, we're working with principals, assistant principals, central office leadership, as well as parents and students. We're working with our supervisory union as well as our teachers union. And we are working with external stakeholders. So Prince George's Community College, Employ Prince George's, as well as our community organization, Hillside Work Scholarship Connection. So thank you to Dr. Zipporah Miller, who is a member of our team, for being involved in our work and where we need support. So we absolutely need support with business partnerships to support our apprenticeship program. So we have business partners, but there's another step. There are other steps to become a youth apprentice provider. And so we absolutely need support with garnering those partnerships and potentially certifying Prince George's County Public Schools as a youth apprenticeship provider. And so for our students who through their high school career want to participate in apprenticeship, being able to utilize areas in PGCPS for those students to complete their training. And again, as the Pillar 3 evolves, really just continued collaboration with our partners and time to really work out what all of these pieces are going to look like as we continue to implement. And I will turn it over to Dr. Canning.
Good evening again. I'm here to share with you about Pillar 4. And Pillar 4 is focused on providing more resources for students' success. The particular pillar has 5 main objectives, which include identifying our students who need more resources, improving the education of English learners and students with disabilities, providing support for students who are attending schools with a high concentration of students living in poverty, and enhancing student health services. So on the next slide, I will share with you the objective 2, which focuses on improving the education of English learners. Within that section, we've identified strategies that focus on ensuring we provide comprehensive engagement and communication with families. This is very extensive and multifaceted, includes not only strategies for interpreting and translation, but also parent engagement and development. This objective also includes strategies around enhancing our curricula and providing comprehensive professional development, which includes a targeted curriculum to prevent long-term English learners and meeting our growing newcomer population. The professional development that's included in this objective is extensive and includes ensuring we're training all staff in Prince George's County around meeting the needs of English learners and developing pipelines to increase ESOL certified staff in the district. The objective asks specifically how we will integrate strategies that are aligned with the Maryland State Department of Ed's English Learner Blueprint Work Group. And some of those strategies include expanding our two-way immersion programs specifically for our English learners, redesigning our high school instructional model, and integrating an English learner data in a platform. On the next slide, I will show you what we're going to do for objective 3, which focuses on improving the education of students with disabilities. The main foci of the Division of Early Intervention and Special Education Services includes a focus on early childhood, access, equity, progress, and secondary transition. Currently, the district is phasing out its CSEP programs, which are the comprehensive special education programs in elementary schools, which allow students with disabilities to attend their neighborhood schools. To address over-identification, the district is reviewing and revising its standard operating procedures and assuring they address the gaps in identification. Additionally, targeted professional development is being provided district-wide and at specific schools based on need. There is also a multidisciplinary team that's being developed to investigate patterns and recommend strategies to address the challenges that are identified, and ensuring that all teachers are trained. The special ed department is providing a combination of asynchronous, in-person blended learning, site visits, and office hours to meet school-based staff's needs. And some of those opportunities are mandatory to meet the federal requirements. And then additionally, the office provides after-school clinics and is working with both the TAG office and the ESOL office to improve identification and support teachers with appropriate training. And then on the next slide, I will share with you objective 4 within Pillar 4, which focuses on how students at schools with a high percentage of low-income students receive more resources. This particular objective focuses primarily on our community school coordinators In Prince George's County this year, we have 96 schools with a community school coordinator. This particular objective focused on ensuring that we have staffed our community school coordinators and have strategies in place to retain these employees. We currently only have 12 vacancies in the community school coordinator positions, and the community school office works regularly with human resources to ensure those positions are filled. The main reasons for those vacancies are due to people moving or getting a promotion. And the community school office also provides regular virtual and in-person support to all community school coordinators. In addition, the community school office provides professional learning opportunities to ensure schools collaborate on the strategies for meeting their school's needs. The community school office also has to ensure that every community school has a healthcare practitioner, and the community school office works with human resources to hire those nurse practitioners and works with contracted agencies who provide healthcare practitioners for schools with vacancies. And additionally, with the implementation of Hazel Health, schools can provide support using telehealth appointments. One of the other areas within the community school coordinators section, or this particular section, is the partnerships. And it provides a comprehensive list of how the community school coordinators or those schools partner with different partnerships throughout the district. The next slide is the final objective in Pillar 4, a very important one that focuses on student health services. And within this objective, the Department of Student Services provides various supports for our students and their families throughout the district. And this, like Dr. Baldwin was sharing, we're way ahead in implementing many strategies for this particular objective. We have already hired a mental health coordinator, and the Department of Student Services works with human resources to ensure that position is filled. Some of the main mental health challenges in the district, which are included in this section, are an increase in mental health needs post-pandemic, staffing, an increased number of challenging behaviors in pre-K through second grade, and access to mental health supports outside of the school system, as well as the nationwide problem of an increasing number of students overdosing. The main strategies addressed in the blueprint include increased professional development for staff, which includes required training for families on a monthly basis, the implementation of Hazel Health to provide both mental and physical health supports for our schools and students, as well as ensuring our schools are aware of our mental health service providers and resources available throughout the district. Additionally, the school system is implementing a new web-based platform, BHWorks, to better identify, track, and address the mental health and social risk factors of our students. And so now that's all of the resources that we're working to provide. Some of our internal stakeholders we have worked throughout, because this is comprehensive and looks pretty much at all of our groups. We worked with every department throughout Prince George's County to ensure everybody's voice is heard. You can see them represented here. On the next slide, you will see our external partners. We worked with some of the Prince George's County Department of Health Services, Hillside Work, Scholarship Connection, Latin American Youth Center, and then community school partnerships. And there's various partnerships throughout there, and of course, our local unions. And we want to thank board member Madeline LaSalle Frazier for her support in working with us on Pillar 4. And some of the work that we could, or advocacy we could use from the board, is just this particular pillar looks at supporting various student groups and is a multi-year endeavor. And so looking forward to the continued collaboration and how the Board of Education will think of implementing its plan and expanding, meeting the needs of both special ed, students from low-income houses, and English learners. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jacks.
And this is our final pillar. This pillar operates a little differently than the other four. This is more of an oversight. For the first objective, notice that it says create, review, and approve implementation plans. Prince George's County Public Schools is responsible for creating the plan. However, the AIB will review and approve the implementation plans. The second objective here talks about establishing and deploying expert review teams. That is done by Maryland State Department of Education. The third objective is also a responsibility of the Maryland State Department of Education. This will be an annual review beginning in 2024. And Maryland will take part in the program for international student assessment. And finally, objective 4 actually involves everyone. So we do have outcomes for every single pillar that you all just heard. And Prince George's County Public Schools will be part of that monitoring, along with Maryland State Department of Education, the AIB, and other entities as deemed necessary by the AIB. So there is a list of possible entities that will participate, but the AIB has not confirmed everyone on that list. So this is a collaborative effort. The different strategies that we're using, all of the pillars have worked with individual work groups, and Pillar 5 is responsible for doing a whole team review of those responses. We are actually doing that process right now, and we will meet with MSDE for some feedback on February 27th. We are repurposing artifacts for various responses, just to support some of the narratives and some of the responses to questions. We are allowed to repurpose those artifacts to support that. Okay, so as stated with all the other pillars, we have internal stakeholders that we're working with. We're working with the unions, and there are also external stakeholders that are listed here. So again, this is a collaborative process. The one thing I do want to point out, with our partnership, we have a parent who is on our committee, and this parent has worked alongside us to support getting the word out to other parents and other community members. So I am going to quickly give you a sneak preview of one of the results from collaborating with the parent, along with Prince George's County Public Schools Office of Communication and Community Engagement. This is a one-pager that is family friendly. There was a request, again, from the community, and this is an example of how we are trying to support community members with understanding the blueprint. Again, this is a quick sneak preview because it has to be translated. And once it is ready for the public, Dr. Libby will share this with the board members. Okay. And we definitely want to thank Board Member Boozer Strother and Member at Large Fields for supporting Pillar 5. At this time, we just ask for overall support. This is a multi-year endeavor, and Prince George's County Public School is definitely looking forward to any support that you will give us in any of the pillars. So we do appreciate your time and your diligence in working with us. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our acting CFO.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the money. So Blueprint is a transformative legislation that's going to be investing nearly $4 billion over a 10-year period into public education, pre-K through 12. It will have a major impact in the way that we currently have been doing business. School districts will begin to budget, allocate, and spend resources towards educating our students in a different way. Funds will be allocated to schools based on weighted student formulas tied to student enrollment and the unique characteristics of those students. Next slide, please. So this gives a visual of how the funding formula will work. It starts with our base level, our foundation funding, and it's on a per pupil basis. This is the largest component of the Blueprint funding. It covers some of the basics relating to funding our students, including operations, maintenance, teacher supplies, technology, mental health supports, salary increases for the teachers, a vast number of different areas relating to just the basics for every single student. Then on top of that, there is a weighted component as well that's more targeted towards the specific characteristics of the students. And then finally, you have the programmatic features of the Blueprint funding, which provides funding across the board that's not necessarily tied to specific students, but more so just tied to support of the school system overall. That includes career ladder, transportation, our comparable wage index aid, which is tied to providing funding for areas that have higher cost of living than others within the state of Maryland. And then the concentration of poverty, the personnel grant, not the per pupil, which is under the weighted component, but the personnel piece of it, the community school coordinators, as was discussed earlier. Next slide, please. So this is just another way to sort of think about the funding streams from the state. So you have your base foundational programs. For PGCPS, we get funding for the foundation. We don't receive guaranteed tax-based funding currently. The way the funding formula works, that doesn't apply to most school districts in the state of Maryland, so it does not apply to us. And then we get funding for the comparable wage index, which is related to the cost of living of hiring our professionals. Next slide. This here covers the various Blueprint initiatives for which we received our funding for. So that's inclusive of the concentration of poverty, full day pre-kindergarten, supplemental instruction, which really focuses towards our early learners who are struggling, transition grant, which is helping us through this transition of the Blueprint, college and career ready, and career ladder. And then finally, we have funding that's really targeted towards certain student populations. That includes compensatory education, which is geared towards our economically disadvantaged students, our English language learners, and special education. So this here gives a nice visual of how you can kind of think about the funding from one student to the next. And I actually leveraged this from the Blueprint implementation website, but I utilized our information for our school system. This is just a sample for fiscal year 2023. And as you look from left to right, you see that we have student A, student B, and student C. And depending on the characteristics of each student, that funding on a per pupil basis will change, will vary. So student A receives, every student receives the base level foundation funding of $83.10. And student A doesn't have any unique characteristics, so they will receive the transportation aid. But then on top of that, there may also be supplemental
policy.
That's provided as well. Student B, however, receives additional aid for English learners, and that amount is similar to the foundation amount. So the targeted weights that you receive for English learners, special education, it's a percentage of the foundation amount for 23. And those weights change as we progress throughout the 10-year period. But for 2023, the English learners is 100% of the foundation amount. So it's in addition to that base foundation amount. And then again, you have your TSI funding and your transportation. Then also in this example, you receive college and career readiness. And then student C, again, different characteristics. You would receive an additional amount for compensatory education, which again is a percentage of the total foundation amount. So it's like 86% for 23. And then this example as well, you see there's an amount in there for special education and so forth and so on. So you can see going from student A that doesn't necessarily have some of the characteristics of student C, the funding that you receive on a per pupil basis may vary. So this is a way to think about our funding and how it aligns to the pillars that were discussed earlier. So the first pillar, early education, covers off on full day pre-kindergarten, Judy Hoyer Centers and special education, full day year round for infants and toddlers. And as you see for 23, we have about $26 million in the budget relating to Pillar 1. For Pillar 2, we have funding set aside for career ladders, and that is around $1.7 million. And I also want to just highlight and point out, as it relates to the funding formulas, the way that they're set up by the state, there is a component that's required to be funded by the state. And then there's a component of that program, of the programs that are funded by the local government. And so what we're looking at here is just the state share of that, but there is a local government component as well that's required to fund the blueprint. Pillar 3, college and career readiness pathways. We have about $1.4 million in the budget for fiscal year 2023. Pillar 4, this is where we have a substantial amount of our funding, as was discussed just a short while ago, where it covers more resources for student success in various areas from our foundation program. And as I mentioned earlier, it covers off on many different areas, including behavioral health, technology, et cetera. Compensatory education funding falls under Pillar 4, English learners, special education, the transportation program, regional cost difference. That is something that's actually changing from 23 to 24, but it's relating to the comparable wage index that we were discussing earlier. In 23, it was a regional cost difference. In 24, it's comparable wage index. So it's kind of shifting the terminology, but it's still relating to the cost of living of hiring professionals to educate our students. Next slide. And then this continues on with Pillar 4, funding for concentration of poverty, the Per Pupil Grant. The educational effort, that naming convention is a bit vague. I mentioned before how we have state funding and we have local funding relating to the Blueprint program. There is a cap, however, on how much the local government has to provide relating to the Blueprint. It's a complicated formula, but up to that cap, anything above and beyond that amount, the state will help provide relief in funding the local share of the Blueprint formula. It's called the educational effort. So for 23, that amount is $26.5 million. We have the concentration of poverty again on the personnel side, so the community coordinators, the transition grant, and then the TSI grant, transitional supplemental instruction, which again is for our struggling early learners. So all in, Pillar 4 has a substantial amount of our Blueprint funding of $1.3 billion for fiscal year 2023. So all in, the state share of our funding for this year is $1.3 billion. And again, there's a local share associated with that as well. But that kind of covers off at a high level on the funding for Blueprint. More to come. We are definitely building the plane and flying it at the same time. We, as mentioned earlier, Dr. Libby, we meet with MSDE every single week, and the AIB is represented at that meeting as well. The biggest change for us is really going to be around how we really budget for the programmatic and the implementation side of this. It's very different than how our systems are currently set up. The state is currently going through an implementation now of developing and building their own system that will allow for student data and financial information to be transmitted back and forth between LEAs and at the state level. So we're having to go through and partner with the state in capturing the information that they need to pull in to this new state financial management system. And that will help to facilitate the calculation of the funding formulas that we will be receiving on a going forward basis. But even as we're thinking about, getting that process set up, we have to also think about the reporting side of it, where we're going to be required later on down the line in fiscal year 25 to begin reporting how we're budgeting, how we're allocating, and how we're spending the resources tied to these different pillars that we just went through. So that is a major shift for us, because we're always thinking about budgeting at a very high level, from divisions down to individual programs, down to individual cost centers. But now we're going to have to really think about how does it align to each of these different pillars, and being able to report on that information from our financial system. So we have a lot of guidance that we're getting from MSDE, but some things are still undecided, and we're looking for that further guidance from the AIB and MSDE to help us understand how we need to think about building our own infrastructure to support the reporting that's going to be required in fiscal year 2025. So building and flying at the same time, more to come as we get further into this implementation. Thank you.
And finally, the expected outcome. Blueprint is for all students. Blueprint is for all students. Early learning through grade 12 and beyond, as you've heard from all of the presenters this evening. This plan is Prince George's County. This plan will be Prince George's County. It includes students, parents and guardians, community members, union members, university and college representatives, and many, many staff from PGCPS. And of course, you, our Board of Education. It ends at the bottom of the slide, Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. And as you can see from our presentation, it is going to be very comprehensive. Now we will take questions. And Nina, you can stop sharing. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you so much, Dr. Libby, and everyone for the amazing presentation. I see a lot of work went into compiling the information. I appreciate just the framing of everything, introducing kind of, what the thought process, why we're doing this, and then talking about the money at the end, because, there was a lot of the points where I was like, oh, this sounds so cool. How much we're getting for it? And so it was really good to hear that all of it kind of tie up at the end with like a red ribbon. So thank you so much. So colleagues, I'll now open the floor for questions. Vice Chair Fields.
Well, first, I just want to commend the staff on the presentation tonight. In my role with Strong Schools Maryland, we've been looking at school districts across the state and where they are. And Prince George's County is like #1 right now. You are really on top of your game. We have a lot of work to do, but I really commend you for this work. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, I appreciated seeing the presentation about educating parents on the blueprint. It is going to be vitally important that we not only educate parents, but all of Prince George's County. The blueprint is only funded fully until 2025. And we could hit a wall in 2025, and we should have learned a lesson with the Bridge to Excellence when they did not maintain funding. We only have a blueprint today because we didn't complete the job with the Bridge to Excellence. And so I think as a school community, we have to make our voices heard in Annapolis that we want the legislature to fully fund the blueprint, because as it stands right now, if there's an economic downturn, we know how politics works. And so all of the good things that we have witnessed tonight could go for naught simply because the legislature doesn't complete the job and fully funds the blueprint. The other thing for a board's perspective that we need to consider right now is that all power is invested in the AIB. The AIB is the state agency that is going to see the blueprint to the finish line. The AIB right now is short-staffed. They have a lot of vacancies, and we need to make sure that while we do all this hard work as a board, not as staff, but as a board, that we are vigilant on the issues, the operational issues behind a blueprint, because that could trip all of us up as well. And I would hate to see all of this hard work get caught up simply because the administrative apparatus at the state level is not where it should be to deliver the promise of the blueprint. And lastly, I would just like to say that, I'm really excited because I think Maryland is going to be a national model if we do this right. And I think Prince George's County is going to be a model school district for the nation. We are one of the most diverse school districts in the country. And if we can do this in Prince George's County, it will send a powerful message across the country that not only that equity matters, but equity can be achieved in a public school district. So hats off to the staff for all your hard work.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fields. Before we continue with questions, I forgot to mention, we will be following the 2 rounds of questioning with the 5 minutes and 3 minutes, colleagues. So just so you know, in terms of your questions, and then I also ask administration staff to be cognizant of the time our board members are getting. But yeah, so Chair Mickens-Murray.
Hi, well, I don't have a question. I have a comment. I think this is an excellent presentation. And I've continued to say that you're one of the best leadership teams that I've ever seen in the school system. You guys know your craft. You do. And everywhere I have been, even when I was down at the advocacy symposium with MSDE, they look to Prince George's County. They really do. And they seek you out, your methods. So I am proud to be a part of this, and whatever I can do to help the board be a part of your success, then I will encourage that. My ask is, are you going to present this to the full board at a meeting like February 23rd or a future meeting? Is that a plan?
Well, I don't think it's February 23rd.
Good, but okay.
I'm working with Ms. Boozer Strother and Mr. Fields, so we can discuss probably a presentation in March after we have submitted the plan, maybe March or April.
Okay, I think this is an excellent plan, and I believe the entire board should receive it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Board Member Briggs.
Yeah, Ms. Howe, well, first, thank you, and I echo what everyone said. I think that this was a great presentation and very, very helpful. So thank you so much for that. Ms. Howe, I had a question about the transition grant. I don't think I caught what they were, and so I was asking myself when you were presenting, like, what is the transition grant, if you could speak to it?
Yes, the transition grant is funding that we're receiving on a temporary basis. I believe it goes through the next 10 years. Well, not fully through the next 10 years, but it's phased out over the next 10 years. So the amount that we're getting in 2023, it will be phased out over the 10-year implementation timeline to get us through the transition of the implementation of Blueprint. And so we're at a certain level for this year, and it goes down by various percentages over the next 10 years to a small amount by the end of 2033.
So essentially the funds to kind of make sure that whatever else kind of technical things need to happen with the Blueprint, there's money for that. Is that like a small portion of money set aside for it?
Yes, and it's not tied to student population. It's already outlined in legislation, the exact amount that each school district is going to receive over that time frame. So it's already been set in stone. It'll be a flat amount that we receive. So we already know that funding, that as we're working on our models on a year-to-year basis, we can kind of build that in and know what that amount is going to be.
Got it, okay. And then I just had another question for Dr. Baldwin. You mentioned, I think at the end, and I really appreciated the what you need from us as far as advocacy that was in all of the presentations. I know you talked about Virginia and DC and that reciprocity is an issue. And I know you also mentioned that there's the national certification piece, there's the Maryland certification piece, and that there's an issue there, right, with aligning there. So I was just curious, with the support that you need from the board around the Virginia and the DC, and then taking into context the Maryland issue with the national certification, was there a distinction there between the Virginia and the DC? Is it easier? Or, I mean, what's the reciprocity issue, I guess?
Sorry, sure. The national certification is based upon the professional standards for national teachers, which is what we call our MBCTs. So you can become, you can earn your MBCT in a specific area. That does not necessarily mean it ties to what you're actually certified to teach under MSDE. So one of the things, and Dr. Libby and Dr. Jacks are aware that I'm struggling right now on my part of the plan, because the AIB and the state want us to identify our MBCTs, but it doesn't match up with what MSDE said is a certification. So as we continue to build our MBCT, which again, you know, I invite you in the spring to our session. We have a large number of MBCTs. So we have 325 teachers. And right now an MBCT, having a student who has an MBC teacher is equivalent to them having an additional month of school. So we are continuing to build up that pipeline again, but it doesn't necessarily tie to the certification. So my concern is, as we continue to help our teachers, we being PGCPS, help our teachers to become certified, the next level based upon the Kerwin and the blueprint is now I need to get them to MBCT. So when we talk about, our teachers teaching all day, going to school at night, working on the weekends to earn these certifications, we are constantly putting more and more and more on our teachers, which scares me. I was dying during the presentation with the special education because I'm a former director of special education. So I remember when that burden of proof switched. And to go back to, I think, a question board member Boozer Struther asked, the challenge is going to be, we're going to need more staff. We're going to need more general counsel staff, as well as everyone knows special education teachers, the burnout rate is higher than our general ed teachers. So if it switches back from what it used to be, we're going to need more staff. But as far as the certification, I will give you a very concrete example. I'm certified in Virginia, worked there for 20 years, came over here. I have to hold 3 certifications in Virginia. Maryland will not give me my teacher certification until I take 2 reading classes. And they can, so as we try to recruit people from these other places who may be tenured teachers, if Maryland is going to require all this additional coursework, which people have to pay for, then people are going to say, why would I even come there? And they'll stay in Virginia or they'll stay in DC. And so I know, you and I have had a small little conversation based upon last night. Teach for America actually pulled out of Prince George's County this year because they couldn't get their teachers certified in Maryland. So they are building up their core in Virginia and DC because of the certification. So I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. I'm sorry.
Oh, right. The timer was going. I was just going to say MBCT is the Maryland board certification. What's the MBCT?
MBCT is a national certificated license for teachers, which it means once they earn that MBCT, they can teach anywhere. And they, it's not as specific as what each state requires. So each state has its own certification requirements. So for example, in Virginia, you can earn a provisional certificate to teach special education with taking only 1 class.
Okay.
To come to Maryland, they may require you to take 2 or 3 more classes to earn that certification. So it's nuances like that.
Okay, that's so helpful, Dr. Baldwin. And I'm gonna, because of being respectful of time, the last thing I was gonna say was, so is your request to us as board members to say, hey, there's pieces in legislation that exist that's making it hard for teachers to get reciprocity if they want to come from bordering states, or it's hard for them to just get certified and we need to do some advocacy around some of those things?
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm asking for. Thanks to your advocacy this summer for those teachers who were not able to complete their certification during the pandemic, you all, with the help of Dr. Golson, were able to kind of push the State Board of Education to give our teachers at least 2 more years to get their certification. So I think there needs to be an advocacy to ask, why do you keep increasing the college credits and requirements when we know pedagogy and good teaching comes from application every single day? So what are the innovative approaches that the state is using besides continuing to say you have to pass this exam, you have to spend more money to go to college to earn class credits, when if I have a teacher who's teaching every single day, that should count as something.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Baldwin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Boozer Struther.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to thank everyone for the excellent presentation. I don't want to, I'm aware of the time, and I only wanted to ask one question, and it could even be a follow-up and might be in the plan. Is the area that I'm concerned about is this early education and the seats. And as Dr. Whitehead said, we need to make sure every early childhood nonprofit for-profit providers know about these expansion grants. I wanted to understand, like, is MSDE doing that job of marketing? Like, are we concerned about that we might actually have providers in our neighborhoods who aren't aware of this? I just wanted to understand a little more about how concerned you are about that everyone knows about these expansion grants.
In the plan, as some of you may know, for example, starting 2021, 2022, The enrollment for pre-K students was supposed to be 70% PGCPS, 30% private providers. Then each year it would drop. It goes to 65, 35% until we're at 60-40. Our private providers are struggling with the requirements. And they have made this known to MSDE. And we as LEAs have asked MSDE, what are the incentives to get our private providers to move to become highly qualified using the pre-K expansion grants? Because you have to understand they are a for-profit business. So if you are now telling them they have to have a highly qualified certified teacher, a highly qualified teacher assistant, that impacts their bottom line. So when we met with the private providers, one of their requests was that, well, you guys should give us the teaching staff. Well, that's great, but right now we're struggling to get our own teaching staff. So there are a lot of issues that MSDE needs to iron out around our private childcare providers, but we need them on board, or else we cannot get every eligible, and let's just talk about tier 1 student in a seat that needs to be in a seat.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think MABE on the whole is also tracking that same issue. It's impacting all the counties. And I think over time, this, like for the future, what I think the board will want to see is number of definite seats, number of students coming, and where we have that gap. And if we just don't have these projections, what that means for infrastructure building too. So which is at the top of MABE's list is that there has to be another bill to build the early childhood centers themselves. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Chair McIntyre.
I know you're short on time, so this is quick. If the folks in the room believe that classroom experience should count towards certification, then we need to put a proposal together, and we need to send that proposal forward to MSDE. So whoever wants to take that on, and I'll help any way that I can. You just let me know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, finally, it counts for colleges. That's what I wanted to say. Work experience counts in other places, so I don't know why it would not count here. So that was my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions? Vice Chair Fields.
No, following up with the chair's point, there are going to be a number of technical fixes that are going to have to take place with the blueprint. It's a great plan, but it's not complete. And so I would just encourage staff, where you identify those areas that require technical fixes, if you could sort of provide that list. So as a board, when we have conversations with our delegation, our Prince George's delegation, that we make sure that they take the lead in pushing that we have legislation that will provide those technical fixes for areas of the blueprint where there are gaps. The other thing, as I sit here and listen to this presentation, I've said this in other places in the state, I think what we're going to find with the blueprint, if it is done correctly, and I believe we will do it correctly in Prince George's County, I believe we're going to see an influx of students, because I think you'll see a reverse migration from private schools back into our public school system when you see everything that the blueprint has to offer. And that's why I think we have to make sure that all of our behaviors are working in coordination with each other. So we have school facilities that are going to have to be up. That's going to be very important, because from early childhood on through 12, I think if we do this right, we're going to see a growth in our school district population. And I think those are the type of unintended consequences that the blueprint will have, that you can't think about when you are drafting legislation. You really can't look into the future and say, oh, this plan is so great, it's going to cause an increase of 3% in the student population of the school district. But looking at the plan and looking at the concerns that we've heard from parents for decades, many parents who pulled their children out of public schools, if we do this right, they will take a second look at public schools and may come back, and we need to be prepared for that.
Thank you, Board Member Briggs.
It's my last piece and I'm going to shut up. I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Mr. Fields just said. I think that it would be really helpful if maybe as the board moves forward and as the blueprint moves forward and we are able to have some time that passes to capture the data and the impact that it's having, to have either a study that is put in place to really track the progress, because I think that if we're each just, saying what we like or we don't like versus an actual outcome-oriented, data-driven report that's really tracking outcomes, in a very thoughtful way. And then that kind of gives back that information to us on the implementation of the blueprint and its impact on the school district. I think that can help to really drive legislative changes, any amendments that we'd like to make in a very targeted way. So just wanted to say, I think that to what Mr. Fields was saying, I wonder if that's something we can champion or advocate as this implementation process is being developed and finalized.
Thank you. Alrighty, so I have only few pretty brief questions. So firstly, for Ms. Pearson, I'm really excited to see kind of like, I know you mentioned, looking over our programs, the APs, IBs, looking over those programs, updating, but also hopefully expanding them. Because I always hear from students from a lot of our schools where they feel it's unjust that this school over here has like 10 AP classes, while my class only offers like 1 or 2, and we're in the same county. And so seeing that being a part of this work is truly amazing. And so I had a question in terms of something you said around there. You mentioned the youth apprenticeship program, and making PGCPS a provider. Do you know kind of what that process is and kind of how, as a board, we could spearhead something like that?
Well, I absolutely can put you in touch with the right people that can. But basically being able to hire our own students as part of their program of study. And so there are federal guidelines as to how that should happen.
Okay. All right. I'll follow up with you for those contacts. But thank you. And then last question was, not last question, but Dr. Caney, my question, you mentioned training for families on a monthly basis. I was hoping you could kind of elaborate on what that looks like, what that is, how it's done.
Sure. Currently, the Department of Student Services is doing Wellness Wednesdays, and they're doing different topics in student health services based on topics that are coming up that are needed. So there's another one coming up soon about fentanyl. So it just depends on needs, and really to help to build families' understanding about supporting student health services, but also help to build their understanding about different topics.
Thank you for bringing that up. And colleagues, I just hope, I'm sure PGCPS may be sharing this on their platforms, but I asked the board members, maybe we go out and make sure parents are getting that information for those meetings as well, so they could join on, especially for that upcoming one on fentanyl use. I definitely would like our families to be a part of that. My last question was for Dr. Libby. You mentioned a presentation for the board potentially in March. So would that be more so on the final report itself, or would it be this presentation?
So it would probably be this presentation with an update on our draft plan. Our draft plan is due to the AIB and MSDE by March 15th. So through email, speaking with Mr. Fields and Ms. Boozer-Strother, we were thinking that we would probably do a full board presentation after March 15th. So you all could see what we actually submitted. And just keep in mind, it will be draft. And I don't think any of us mentioned, this is just the first plan. We will be back next year with the second plan and probably more plans after that. And Mr. Briggs, you mentioned the outcomes. The AIB actually has a work study group that's working on outcomes, and everything that we're supposed to put in the plan is supposed to be based on the outcomes, but we haven't seen that as of yet.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Libby.
Mhm.
That's it for me. If colleagues, you have no other questions or comments, I thank you all so much for your hard work and for giving us this amazing presentation today. So thank you again. And like I said before, if you wish to stay, feel free. If not, happy Valentine's Day and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
All righty, colleagues. Moving forward. So 4.0 policies for discussion. Tonight we have two policies for discussion. First up is draft policy on student sunscreen use. So I'll yield the floor to Ms. Welsh for an update on this new draft policy.
Okay, student sunscreen use is basically mandated by law. And it was, let's see, House Bill 427 that was passed back in 2018. And it requires every Board of Education to develop a sunscreen policy. And so everything you see here is basically almost verbatim from the law, but basically what it's telling us is that students are authorized to carry their own sunscreen and apply their own sunscreen. And then also educating students about the fact that the sun safety, making sure that when they are out in the sun, that they do put sunscreen on. So that is about it in a nutshell. The administrative procedure, when it's developed, they'll have a little bit more detail, but not too much more, because it's really just about you can carry sunscreen and put it on. So that's it.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions or comments? All righty. So I guess from this, Ms. Welsh, if you could push the policy on for action, whichever its next steps are. So I don't think anyone's opposed or needs this to come back next meeting. So as long as it
will need to go through OGC review, as well as Dr. Golson needs to review it and approve it to move forward.
Okay. Thank you. Alrighty, we'll move forward to revised policy 5162.1, which is the do not resuscitate order. So Ms. Welsh, can you give an update on this?
So our previous do not resuscitate order was really just had like one paragraph. And so this one is just a little bit more detail. It is basically based on the Maryland State School Health Services guidelines, and then some state law and state regulations. In essence, what this policy is stating in a statement is that the Board of Education does recognize that parents have a right to make some decisions about their children when they have life-threatening illnesses. And one of those, of course, would be if they did not want their child to be not be resuscitated if they were having a cardiac or respiratory type of incident. And so it says that in the policy statement. And then basically it says that, so the form that they now use is called the MOLST, MOLST form, and that stands for Maryland's Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And so in essence, this is pretty quick and concise in that it just says if we receive a form, if a school sees this form like that, that is sent, basically the school health nurse would look at it, would also send it over to the school health services office so that they would review it. It talks about that once we have that information, the nurse would sit down with the parents and certain school staff to put a plan together for how they might have to implement that, the MOLST order. If an incident did occur, then that also talks about the fact that both any staff member that is regularly with this student, as well as the student, if like say if they're in a wheelchair or something, and then within the folder or the student's file would have this MOLST order in it, as well as a copy of it would go over to the health services. And then also transportation would be a major important piece, because if in fact an incident did occur on a bus, say when a student was coming to school, the transportation staff absolutely need to be informed about the order. The student has to have the order on them. And instead of, and so that when the when they call 911, they come in to help them, that they can hand that form over to them so they know for a fact that this is what the student has. It also talks about confidentiality. This is, we can't be spreading that information around to other people. And then if in fact if the student did have a cardiac arrest and the student did pass, then it talks about the fact that the principal would call in the crisis intervention team to work with other students and staff within the building to help them get through the process of that incident. So that's basically, it's pretty functional. It just lays out the pieces.
Thank you. Colleagues, any comments or questions? All right. Hearing none, Ms. Welsh, if you could take under advisement that we would like to pursue action. I'm not sure, you said this one needs review.
It'll go through the review process and then to Dr. Golson.
All right, so if it could be brought back
at the next meeting.
Righty. All right, policies for review or action. So we have one policy for review or action. That is policy 8100, standing committees and focus work groups. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward revised policy 8100, standing committees and focus work groups to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment.
So moved. Oh, second.
Been properly moved in second. I'll now yield the floor to Ms. Welsh.
So in addition to all the changes we have made, because we've actually now discussed this policy, I don't know how many times, but we have discussed it and we've made a lot of different changes, I think, for the good within the policy. But the two newest changes to the policy has to do with the fact that I did incorporate in the fact that the board chair will also contact the student member of the board prior to their term on the board to select a committee and have in parentheses S, so committees to serve on. And that'll be really important, especially in light of the fact if some aspect of the other bill we discussed gets through, it has to do with the students' voting rights, then that might be important in terms of what committees. And then the other piece I wanted to point out is, so before we finalize this, I felt strongly that we should really know what the MBE is and what the LBE is, where it says that the committee, the Operation Budget and Fiscal Affairs Committee, is supposed to appoint one of the members of that committee to serve on as the board's liaison on the minority-based enterprise. So and MB is minority-based enterprise, which I assumed that's what it was. But then the I forget what the other one was. We saw LBE. No one seemed to. Oh, it was a local business entity, but if you go into where the blueprint schools are and everything, they no longer reference local business entity as local business entity. They reference it as county-based business. So in talking to both Dr. Golson and to our director of purchasing, they said that it should say county-based business. And actually, just so you know, prior to COVID, that advisory committee was working all the time. They would meet regularly so that they would be constantly reviewing the contracts and making sure that they're, what the numbers were for minority-based businesses and local-based businesses, and really sort of a monitoring process almost. And then when COVID came, it sort of discontinued. So when I brought the question up to Dr. Golson, she basically directed the director of purchasing to begin the advisory committee at the council beginning in March. And so the budget committee, our standing committee, operations and fiscal affairs, will need to identify someone on that committee to begin attending the this advisory council. So those were the only two additional changes that we made in terms of this policy.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. Colleagues, any questions, comments? All righty, hearing none.
Wait.
Oh,
I have a comment.
It's very-
Okay, I think Mr. Briggs should be on that committee. Committee, that's the comment.
Why?
Because I just think you would be really good at it.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll accept the compliment. And if that's open as an option, then I'm happy to join.
All righty. Anything else? Okay. Colleagues, any objections to forwarding a revised policy 8100 for public comment by the full board? Hearing none, motion passes and the policy will be forwarded to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. Committee recommendations, there are none. Follow-ups. Follow-ups from previous meetings will be posted on board docs upon receipts. And the next policy and governance meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 28th, 2023 at 5 p.m. This meeting will be virtual, and please check the board page on the PGCPS website for more information. Lastly, closing remarks from the chair. Thank you everyone for a great meeting. Thank you for bearing and staying strong and understanding, the time commitment that we had. So thank you everyone for your good questions and all the good work. Are there any additional comments from anyone before we adjourn? All righty. Seeing none, colleagues, may I have a motion to adjourn the February 14th, 2023 policy and governance meeting?
So moved.
The second. It has been properly moved in second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes and tonight's meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
meeting.
night.
Happy Valentine's.
Happy
Good night.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, happy
Good night, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day.
That's a good.